Dobrý den všem, si dovolím popřát. Já nebudu na úvod téhleté besedy zdržovat nějakým dlouhým povídáním. Všichni víte, jaké vzácné hosty jsme dnes tady v Brně měli. My jsme si u příležitosti toho, že dnes zasedala mezinárodní porota, která doporučuje Radě města Brna výběr ředitele kanceláře architekta Města, tak jsme si při této příležitosti, když už jsme do této mezinárodní poroty přizvali známá jména ze zahraničí, tak jsme si dovolili právě s jednou z těchto členek poroty, a to paní architektkou Tinou Saaby, domluvit to, že tady s námi ještě večer po skončení práce poroty zůstane a řekne pár slov o tom, jakým způsobem se dělá plánování města v Kodani. Já jsem velice rád a vítám tady paní architektku Tinu Saaby. Byl nesmírný pokus o přivítání. A než jí předám slovo, jenom dvě krátké informace. Následnou besedu bude moderovat Adam Gebrián, který je také členem poroty. Kterému děkuji, že se této práce ujme. A poslední věc, kterou jsem ještě před zahájením besedy chtěl zdůraznit, že dnes je předposlední den, kdy můžete jako veřejnost připomínkovat návrh nebo koncept návrhové části plánu udržitelné městské mobility, což je jeden z velmi důležitých dokumentů, které město právě v oblasti nějaké strategie plánování města, tvorby města, tak který město připravuje, a jako veřejnost se do jeho přípravy můžete zapojit, takže ještě dnes a zítra můžete podávat své připomínky. Teď už tedy prostor pro paní Saaby.
I think that the Danish people and the Czech people has a lot in common, and one of the things is that we quite like beers. So there was a really nice guy here offering me a beer, so I just wanted to say cheers. There is still a few seats up here in front. There's always some chairs that nobody dares to take, but I just tell you that there is still four. Nobody dares to come up here. Huh? My name is Tiny Saaby, and I work as the city architect in Copenhagen. And I will try to tell you a little about how we look at urban planning and how we try to work with architectural quality within the next 60-70 slides, and then you can see if I have to go fast or slow. If there is any questions, just feel free to ask, so don't wait to the end. I don't have to show all my slides, so please ask if there is anything. The first thing I want to start before I talk about Copenhagen is that I want to tell you a little bit about, yeah? Because of the camera, I stand here. What I wanted to start to say was that if you are standing on the floor, it's much easier to have eye contact than if you're standing here. So the different levels means quite a lot. The beginning is that what we try to focus on is that we try to focus and begin with the human beings before we start to talk about how things should look like. So by understanding the body and by understanding the way that we interact and by understanding how we interact together and how we have a community together, we can have a lot of knowledge from that in the way that we design our cities. This shows what is happening when the inside of the building and the outside is working together. And it seems so simple that there is a window but in everyday work it's sometimes quite difficult. So you can just walk around, probably also your own city, and often it is difficult to look into the buildings. So that is one of the things that we try to focus on. How can we keep an eye contact between the inside and the outside? Because no one will pie or above a window, and when there is people inside and looking outside, nobody will steal a car. So there is a lot of safetyness in the way that the inside and the outside does connect. The thing about looking at the body is not anything new. This is a drawing by a very famous architect, Le Corbusier. And Le Corbusier was one of the biggest modernistic architects that was in the last century. Le Corbusier had also a focus on what is happening with the body. That when we sit down, we have an eye level on 120. When we stand up, we have an eye level on 160. And if we can touch things, it's more in a human scale. If we have a tall building, you feel like a small human being. So there is a lot of understanding about the human size and the human body that Le Corbusier already was talking about 100 years ago, and a lot of other philosophers if you go 1,000 years back. So it's always been interesting to focus on the human body. What happened at the time when Le Corbusier was the main architect was that he designed cities like this, and a lot of other architects in the modernistic period designed buildings like that. And the idea was that we should all have fresh air, a good view, bigger apartments, and all the basic understanding of human being was very, very good. There was just one thing that they thought in the modernistic period, and that was that if we just made the same condition for everybody, everybody would be happy. What we realize today is that we are not alike. We are so totally different, and we live our lives so totally different. Some is living alone, some is living in big families, men is living together, having babies in the week, every second week, and some is living in big families, and we all have different choices of how we live our lives. This way of looking at society, that was not possible because it was the same apartment that was put all over the cities. And also in Copenhagen and in Denmark, we have a lot of places. They do not look like that, but they were based on the same way of looking at society, that if we made equal decisions for everybody, everybody would be equal and have the same. I think that is a world that we are living right now, that we think that we can plan everything in an ideal way. Today we know that we are different. We know that we can't find the ideal husband, and we can't design the ideal kitchen, and we can't design the ideal neighborhood. We know today that everything is changing, society is changing the whole time. And that means that by looking at people, we now have to look more about the diversity of people and see if we can embrace that diversity in the way that we look at planning. And I'll try to show you that in some of the cases from Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a little bit bigger than Brno. It's 550 inhabitants. It is the capital of Denmark. It's not a big capital, but it's still a capital. It's a growing city, so we have 1,000 new inhabitants every month, which means that we are, compared to the size, growing quite fast. That means that we have a lot of challenge by building new housing, bike lanes, kindergartens, cultural issues, sports facilities, and all that kind of stuff. Is Brno also a growing city? Yes or no? Yes. Good. How many a month? Not much, but growing. If we look at the way that we try to look at planning, we try to discuss it on 3 different levels. So we try to look at the large scale which is where we look at how we work strategic with the city. So that is the city-wide strategies. And I'll come back to that. Then we have something we call the site-specific planning. This is where we go down to a neighborhood and make planning for a special place or a special neighborhood in the city. And then we try to focus on the very, very small scale, which is each single person or stakeholders or developers or project. But we try to also have the focus on the small scale and each single person that is behind that. And I'll try to show you some different projects on those three levels. So I'll talk about one strategy that is called Co-Create Copenhagen, one medium scale neighborhood improvement, and then I'll show you 18 projects in the end, if the time is for it. Okay? It feels in a way it's a little strange to stand up here. The large scale we have, and I think that is also what you have here in Brno, an overall plan, which is the zoning plan, which tries to put out the planning, the overall planning for the whole city. We have that as well, but we also have a lot of different strategies, and I don't know how much you're working with that here, but we have a climate plan, we have a bike strategy, we have a pedestrian strategy, we have an architecture policy, we have a housing strategy, and we have a lot more than you can see in this. And of course, all those strategies have to work together. But it's, I think, in a way, it's new to work more strategic. So in the old day, in the modernistic period, we did a fixed master plan that decided and designed everything in front. Today, we do not do that much fixed master plan. We try to be more strategic. And it also means that in the dialogue with our politicians, we try to discuss with the politicians what kind of vision they have for the city compared to each theme, and not so much about do they like that or that, but we try to discuss architecture as something that is about what it does to human being and not so much about how it looks. So there is a change in the way that we try to discuss that. Often I say that when we talk about how the city should look like, there should be a lot of projects that you do not like in the city. So there should be a lot of projects that the politician have the different opinion about how does it look, in my opinion. If they agree on, or if we agree on how architecture should look like, we will have very, very boring cities. So it's very important that we actually disagree about the look of architecture, because otherwise we can't embrace the diversity of people. So therefore we will not ever discuss how it looks when we discuss with the citizen or with the politicians, but we always try to discuss the impact of architecture. Now I'll talk about Co-Creation Copenhagen. That is a strategy that was decided by our politicians in the end of last year, and it is starting by the 1st of January. So it's a totally new strategy. Someone is gone here. And that strategy is taking over for two other strategies that we've been having the last 5 years. So in 2010, our politicians decided that we want to look at a sustainable city, and they decided that we wanted to be a livable city. Those strategies just ended 2015, and therefore we decided to make this new strategy. That strategy is based on understanding that early dialogue is very important for the quality of the city. This is from a project in a deprived neighborhood in Copenhagen, and we tried to get all the kids into a big workshop so that we could co-create a playground together. It was very difficult to get those kids into joining a workshop because they didn't know anything about designing playgrounds. So what we did was that we tried to go out and design a spiral and then the kids was coming after us saying, what are you doing? That is just one way of making early dialogue. You can make early dialogues in a lot of different ways. But we have had a lot of experience in the last 10 and 15 years that by getting early dialogue with people and the stakeholders, it makes better projects in the end. We also learned that by having partnerships with NGOs and with the private sector, commercial sector, with all the different stakeholders we are having in the city, we get better projects. So we also have a lot of learning in how we communicate together with other people. And then we have something that we call neighborhood improvement. And the case that I will show you on the minimum scale is a neighborhood improvement. But neighborhood improvement is a program half paid by the state and half paid by the city that implies that we will try to lift a neighborhood that is deprived by putting an office locally in the neighborhood. Those colleagues of mine working locally on the site with the citizen, they do a lot of experimenting in how we have dialogues together, how we design urban spaces, how we talk together, how we organize the development of the city. And by learning from those colleagues, we have had a lot of experiments that we put into this new strategy. Then it is also a basic understanding of the need of the city instead of the need of the administration. So if we go 10 to 15 years back, a lot of my colleagues was more working in the administration for the sake of the administration and that it should be easy for them. And there has been a totally change the last 10-15 years that we as administration is there for the people and not there for our own job. So we have been focusing on trying to understand the need of the city instead of the need of the administration. And that knowledge we have been putting into this as well. All this co-creation, all this participation, all this dialogue with all the stakeholders is something that we can see is a global tendency, and probably a lot of you is working with that. You that are here as professional is probably working with it in your professional lives. A lot of you that is here as citizens is probably the citizen that often join those kind of processes. I think something that is new is the way that we have to work together and the way that we have to understand that it is a new situation that we are going into. This is a Danish researcher, Annika Akker, and she says, and I want to read it because I think she is so clever, she says, politicians and managers was there to give up some control and deviate from family routines. So politicians and managers, I am a manager and all the urban planners as well. On the other hand, citizens must get used to not only be demanding customers in the welfare shop, but they also need to take part of the responsibility. And it takes time to get used to for all parties. So the citizens and the stakeholder has to take a responsibility, not only complaining about society, not only complaining about the politicians and the administration. And we as the administrations and politicians has to give up a little of the control that we've been having for the modernistic period as well. All this we have been putting into this strategy that our politicians has been discussing for the last year. We have been designing this strategy, and it points out that we have 3 focus areas. So we want to have a livable, responsible city with an edge, and I'll go a little into that. A livable city is something that we've been working with also for the last 10 years. One of the indicators is that we want to be the world's best city for cyclists. We have been working with that for the last 10 or 15 years. How many has been on a bike down here today? Yeah? 15, 20? That's okay. That's okay. Next time I'll ask, it will be maybe more. In Copenhagen, I think that the last data we got was that 67% of all people living in Copenhagen is taking the bicycle every day to work and to school. So that is also our kids going to school on bicycle, and the old people be on a bicycle as well. So it is something that our politicians has been giving money to every year. They have been paying for new bicycle routes and for new bicycle bridges and things like that. I'll tell you a little about that later. Then we have a focusing on to get better everyday life in urban spaces. In the last city life strategy we had a focus saying that city life was people walking, staying, and the diversity. In that period we had a lot of festivals and events. In the new strategy we try to focus still that urban life is to get more people outside. So we do work very strategic with getting more people outside. And within a 10-year period, all people have to spend 20% more time outside than they are doing today. So we go and count how much time you will be in urban space every year, and we present it for the politicians every year, how we succeed in that. And then the last one is that we want to have more nature in the city. I don't know how it is here in Brno, but I can see in a lot of other cities that there is a lot of people fighting for trees. Do we fight for trees here as well? A little bit? Yeah? In Denmark or in Copenhagen, that's totally the same situation. So there is a lot of citizens that has been screaming for getting more nature into the city. And our politicians is really keen on that we now should be also paying for getting more nature in the city. So we just made a new strategy that was also voted for by the end of last year, that was pointing out that we need to focus on how we can get more nature into the city. And nature not only by trees, but also by looking at biodiversity, so that we get different kind of habitats into the city. So a lot of people in the city administration right now try to help us making different kind of tools, so that we also can get the private investors to pay for more nature, and that we can also get the citizens to take care of the nature themselves instead of the city taking care of everything. Then the second indicator is that we want to have a city with an edge, and in that there is two goals. The first one is that means that we want a very flexible and creative city. And what is that? That is a lot of temporary activities, that is a lot of temporary use in the building, a lot of experimentation in how we can actually try to be more flexible and creative in the way that we use the space. But it is also a focusing on how can we get unique neighborhoods that belongs together. So often when we discuss with the different investors and clients, there is often a client that wants to take one housing block from this neighborhood, and then he wants to build it in another neighborhood, because then he only needs one couple or one set of drawings, and then he spares a lot of money. But we try to let them understand that each time we will start with the project, we have to make some kind of character analysis. So the city administration will go out and make a site analysis together with our different kind of colleagues, and then we start to discuss what kind of character do we need in this neighborhood, which means that will be the basic and fundament of every client when they want to create a new neighborhood. So therefore again, Ørestad is one neighborhood, someone loves it, someone hates it, that's okay, everybody should not want to live in Ørestad. And some of the other characters or other neighborhoods someone else like, and that is perfect, because then we again can have the diversity of the people. The last one is that we also want to be a responsible city, and the first thing is that we've been working with being CO2 neutral in 2025, now for 5 or 10 years, and of course we still want to keep that going. We just had a discussion with our politicians 1 month ago, and now it really gets hard with the next step in being CO2 neutral. and it really cost a lot, both of money and resources and political ambitions. And we were a little afraid that our politicians would say that we wanted to slow down our ambition. But they all went into it and said, no, we still trust that goal and we still want to go into it. Then the second one is that we want to have no waste of resources. And in the beginning that was mostly about garbage and how we take care of the waste, but it ended up also being a goal that is about human resources, that it is about circular economy, that it is about the way that we work together, so it is resources in a more broader way. And the last one is that we want to be climate proof with greater value, and I'll show you a little about that later on. So we have a strategy for how to take care of the climate, both the heating and the watering, but we also have a strategy and a plan for taking care of all the rainwater in the city, which means that our politicians just voted for 300 projects that will go on for the next 10 years about how to take care of the rainwater. So that was one of the strategies that we are having on the large scale, a totally new strategy. And what is the main issue in this Co-Create Copenhagen? That by all the different 8 indicators and goals that we are having, it has to be done together with the citizen and the stakeholders in general. So this co-creating is something that we really have to train on for the next 10 years. What does it mean, both for the administration and for the citizen? What kind of methods are we going to have? I think that one of the things that we have to be better at is to ask questions. Because often when we do some kind of workshop, we go and ask people, what do you want? How should they know? They only know what they want because of the history of yesterday. So that is a stupid question to ask citizens. So we have to start to discuss and ask questions in totally new ways, so that we get some knowledge that we didn't have before and build on that knowledge if we want to use it as something that makes better quality and also something that makes innovative projects. The medium scale. Now we go down to a specific neighborhood. It is called St. Kjelds. It lies in the climate, it is called the climate quarter, and I'll tell you a little about that. How many has been in Copenhagen? It's more people been in Copenhagen than it's been bicycling today. I just tell you. Probably you have not been in this area, because it is not on the outskirts of Copenhagen, but it is a little far away from the center. And I just showed, this is the area, so this is the middle-aged city, and this is a little bit on the outskirts of the city. All the other numbers is other neighborhood improvements. So the neighborhood improvement will stay for 5 years. I think I have a slide saying that. It is limited for a 5 years period, and they will go on site with the office, which I think is really, really a main issue in the innovative and the quality of the projects that they are doing. And they are also organized in a way that it is the local stakeholders that is a part of the steering group and the board of taking decision in the neighborhood. They have a small amount of money that goes into designing new urban spaces. This neighborhood improvement began in 2011 in the beginning, and we did a competition, a European competition, which is for young architects. And we asked the young architects to design one of the main urban squares in this area. But then when we had the competition, there was quite one of the biggest cloudbursts ever on the 2nd of July. So instead of designing an urban space, the group of architects that won the competition designed a strategy for this area and not a fixed urban space. So they went in and analyzed the whole area, saying that we could take 20% out of all the asphalt and turn it into nature that could take care of the rainwater. And they won the competition. It is a small Danish office called Third Nature, by making this strategy. and that transformed the whole neighborhood into what we call the climate quarter, which now means that there is a lot of private investment that is also coming into the city because the brand of this neighborhood is so strong. This is one of the spaces, how it looked before. And then they experimented, they did a lot of temporary activities, events, a lot of different kind of workshops where they went into interaction with the local neighborhoods. And they tried to understand what kind of use could this urban space have. Then we did design a program, and we invited 3 teams to make an architectural competition. And the winning team was a small office called GHB that designed this urban space. So this is how it looks today. This is the first urban space we are having that can take care of the rainwater, or is designed to take care of heavy cloudburst, and it works. So when there is heavy cloudburst, it goes down into this bowl, which is beautiful both when the water is there, but it is also quite beautiful with the flowering when the water is not there. So it can both be beautiful with water and without water. This is another corner in this area, and then they did a temporary project where you can go into the area and have a small scale for the human beings that is living in the local neighborhood. It is a temporary project, so it will only be there for 3 years, and then we will take it away. Maybe that has meant that we have been getting more money to make a permanent outdoor space. There is a roof farm in the area as well. So my colleagues, when they are working in this area, is more facilitating and inspiring and motivating the local neighborhood. So they said, my colleagues had been finding this roof, and then he had been talking to a lot of different people and saying to them, there is a free roof, or maybe you can use it for something. And then 3 young people decided, wait, we want to make a roof farm. And then my colleague just gave the telephone number of the guy that owns the building. And then he didn't do anything more. Then the young people just did the job themselves and contacted him saying, can we borrow your roof? And he said, you can do that. He had bees in his garden, so he thought that urban gardening is fine for me. So they actually developed this project totally on their own, just with a little help from the city administration once in a while. This is just to show that a lot of other projects will go on in a neighborhood improvement. So now we will turn the pedestrian area into something that is more nature-like, small corners with taking care of the rainwater as well. The blocks will be energy optimized, and that will be focusing on how we can make them more climate-proof as a part of it. The yards will be focusing on how we can transform it into green yards instead of asphalt. That was the medium scale, and that is a neighborhood improvement. Medium scale is also about how we will develop new areas in the city. And I can give a lecture of every single area, but I won't do that, but just show you that by focusing on the medium scale can be with a lot of different ways of planning the city. This is from Ørestad. This has one character. This is from Northern Harbour, but we try to focus on making it a little difficult for the cars, so that people will take the bicycle instead. This is a new local plan for an area where we have been taking care of the rainwater, and we have transformed it as an identity for the whole area. So the building will look different in this area than it will do in other areas. And it's just to tell you that all this character issue, the uniqueness and the diversity of people is also something that we can work with when we do the local planning in Brno. Now I'll go down to the small scale. It's really hot in here, isn't it? I'm still awake? The first project in the small scale discussion here is the first bicycle bridge that we were having. It is designed or built in 2006, and it is a part of a strategic thinking that we're doing in our bicycle strategy. In our bicycle strategy, we are saying that if we want people to bicycle more, we should make it easy and fast. So there is a chapter focusing on how can we make it easy and fast for the citizen. And by making those shortcuts, crossing the river or the harbor, as it is in Copenhagen, we totally change the geography of the city. Now you can take a bicycle from the main station to wild nature within 7 minutes on bike, and if you take the car, it will probably take you 25 minutes. So therefore, more people take the bicycle because it's faster. When we built it, we thought, or planned it, we thought that 3,000 people would take the bicycle every day. Today there is 12,000 people taking the bicycle on the bridge every day. So it has an impact that we paid a lot of Danish crowns to build this bicycle bridge. It is also half paid by the private investors, because the private investors can also see that it makes a good impact, because now the people living on the other side of the harbour get closer to the metro and the main station. So therefore, the value of their estate will raise as a part of building that bridge. So in a way, it's also a way of talking about how can we create values for everybody in going together in different kind of partnerships. This is a free green yard. It is my own former yard, and it is a part of the program where the state will pay half of it and the city will pay half of it. So every worn out yard in Copenhagen can get a free green yard if they make it car free, if they take care of the rainwater on their own, if they will do it based on a democracy, and if they will have no fencing at all in the yard. So they have to agree on that they want to have a green yard, and then they can get it for free. So that's a program that has been running in Copenhagen for 20 years. And I think, for me myself personally, it's a reason that I have been staying in the city with my 2 kids that is now grown up. So it is a way of also inviting families to stay in the city. Going back 25 years, Copenhagen was totally broke, so we were put under administration and the city was bankrupt, and therefore the state started with putting money into the city so that Copenhagen could also have richer people and not only the poor people. And today families stay in the city with the kids, and that is one of the reasons. The third short story is just to tell that this is a project or a social housing project. On the strategic level, there is a plan that 20% of all housing in Copenhagen should be social housing. In Denmark, social housing is organized so that it is not the city administration, but it is a non-profit organization that you can say is private. But the city pays 10% of the amount of money for the social housing. So it's both in the new areas, but it is also in the old areas. Right now it's difficult to get 20% because of the price of the land that is going up. So therefore there is a state discussion about if they are going to give the city some money so that they can actually, or allow the city to pay more money for the land so that the NGO can buy it cheaper. They do not agree, our politicians, on that. But my reason also to show you it is that this is a very cheap apartment or row house for young families that live very close to the center. And I think it's very important, if we talk about the diversity of people, it's very important that we have different ranges of expensive, or we both have cheap and expensive apartments, so that a lot of more people can live in the city. And that it has to be damn good architecture. So even though it's cheap housing, it has to be at least as good architecture as the more expensive one. And this is a fantastic area designed by a Danish architect called ONB. This is a small story on how we try to design the edges between the building and the urban space. So we have something we call edge zones, where we try to focus on how does the building meet the urban space. Often the building is designed by one architect and the urban space by another architect, and they do not really communicate, because who's paying them for communicating? Nobody is. So we really have to focus on that they have to talk together. So we do put a lot of regulation on the building, on how the ground zone should be. This is a new multi-arena that is being built in Město. And what I think is amazing is it was an international competition with great architects like Foster's and some of the star architects of the world. They didn't win this competition because all of the other multi-arena was just a big, huge, round building. And they did have openness at ground floors. But this building is creating small spaces. So there is a small urban space here, small urban space here, small urban space here. The guy here can connect and have eye contact with the guy here. Small details on how people will interact with each other. And I would hope that that will be a fantastic area, even though it is a multi-arena that is one of the biggest buildings we are having in Copenhagen. Then there is this focusing on the city in slow motion. One of the things that is happening when we have cities for pedestrians and bicycles is that we have time to have eye contact. So the speed, no matter what and how fast we go, will always be so slow that we will have eye contact with each other. And that creates a livable city. This is from one of the most famous urban spaces, and it's just a transit space. But it's also just to show you the design. So this is the pedestrian, this is for the handicapped people. Then there is one step down, then you have the bicycle area, and it's quite a broad bicycle area, so you can see there is dots here. So this is for the slow bicycle, and this is for the fast bicycle. Then you go down a step again, and then you have the road on the other side. Then you just put up some small benches, and everybody is sitting there because they have eye contact with the people here, and everybody is biking here because they might meet some of the friends that they are sitting on the bench. It is called, in Copenhagen, it is called the biggest Copenhagen catwalk in the city. So it is a place for young people, especially now when spring starts and summer will be there, and hopefully they fall in love or meet some of their good friends. This is a story about how we try to work with public access. So this is a private bank called SEB, a Swedish bank, and this is private area. When he was having his local plan, he was not allowed to fence this area. So in the local plan, we write that there should always be public access, and you are not allowed to make a sign saying this is private area, or you're not allowed to put any fencing. So it is just a small sentence in our local plan saying that if you do build, then you have to have public access. And it is a fantastic urban space that is designed by a Danish architect called SLA, and this is Lundgaard and Tranberg. The public bath is another small story. This is designed by Vic in 2002. In 2000, the harbor has been so clean that you can swim in it. So an investment in the last century changed the whole system of pipes. So before, all the shit went into the harbor, and then we changed the pipes so that it does not go into the harbor any longer. And it means that the whole harbor is now the biggest urban space we have. And in the old day, the harbor was splitting Copenhagen in two, the shit island from the real island. But today the harbor is actually the one that connects the city, because it is seen as an urban space that is a recreational area instead of an industrial harbor. This is a small story about this pedestrian area. So we try, by the knowledge of the human being, we know that we will only stay outside if the sun is there and if there is no wind. So we try to see if we can use that knowledge in the way that we design urban spaces. So the pedestrian area over here is just a very small one. because it's the shattering side and this is the sunny side, so therefore the pedestrian area is a lot broader in this area so that people will stay out for a longer period. A lot of temporary projects is on the way in Copenhagen. And as you could see in the strategy for co-creation Copenhagen, it is now a political goal that we want to design temporary urban spaces. So now the politicians is starting to ask us to use that as a tool of getting new knowledge of some of the old areas. 10 years ago, politicians thought it was stupid with all those wild projects that was coming bottom up and starting in the city. But now it is a political demand as well that we work in this way. And then as a part also of co-creation Copenhagen is that we try to give the area free. So this is an area where we just ask people, if you want to plant flowers, you can come and get some flowers and then you can plant them in the small areas where there is, on public area, where there is trees instead. It is an experiment, so we started it last year, and then we will see if people can take care of it or if we have to come and clean it afterwards. So I'm quite curious about that. The open schoolyard is also a decision that has been taken citywide, that all the schools in the city is now without fencing. So when we renovate a new school or build a new school, they're not allowed to put fencing around, but it has to be open so that all the people in the city can use the playground in the weekend and during the night, which means again that it will be the diversity of human beings and not only for the school kids. And then you can say that over the last 20 years, I think that the politicians has been invested so much in public space. And I think that is also one of the reasons that Copenhagen is right now one of the cities that people is going to when they look at livability and how they can learn something. And it is a very strong cooperation between the political politicians, between the city administration, and together with public stakeholders. So if everybody is not agreeing on making a good city, it won't succeed. So we really have to have ambitious politicians that also can agree on putting investment in the city development. We have to have a good administration with the best people in the world that is working with innovative solutions and not only as they did yesterday. And we need a public debate that it's not only being an angry group of people, but being a group of people and a lot of NGOs that want something good to happen in the city. And everybody has to accept that they have different roles and that they have to cooperate to make the good cities. This is one of the new urban spaces that has been both the public and private investment last year. Then we talk about edge zones before in the city, but it is also when we talk about housing area. And when I began the story about when we stand up, we have a height on 160, then we can look above here. But when he sits down, he has his own private space. So the knowledge of what is happening between 120 eye level and 160 eye level means a lot of difference from how it can become both something that is private but also something that is public. There is only 5 more. This is an app that we have been developing. You probably also have a lot of different apps, but what is interesting about this is that we ask people for help. So if you see something, when you walk around in the city, you see a hole in the asphalt or a tree that has fallen or whatever, you can just give a note on this app and computer and say something is wrong, and then the administration has to apply and say, well, we come and fix it or whatever they're saying. But it spares the city for a lot of money to go out and see it themselves. And of course the citizen actually can help the administration by having eyes and by observing the city. And it works quite well. The 5th one is just a small example of how we work with the parking, the bicycle parking. And I choose this case as well, because we were talking about the human beings. Normally, when you park your bicycle, there is a lot of, it just looks awful. Bicycle is not beautiful, and they are not standing very nicely, so that it doesn't look nicely at all. What the architect did here was that they took down the level 40 centimeters. So when you look above those bicycles, you do not look at the bicycle, but you look at the people that is walking on the other side of the bicycle. So it's much easier to get eye contact, and the sign of where you look of your view, you don't see the bicycle as much as you do when they're standing on the ground. So a very small trick based on the knowledge of human being is now working. It's the best bicycle parking we are having. And now we're trying to use that integrated bicycle parking in a lot of other projects. Another thing that is interesting is that human beings do not park a bicycle on something that is not flat. So therefore they do never get bikes here, which means that it always looked organized because it stands in an organic form. It's very beautiful. This one is one of our sports halls, so it is also a public building. And I took this as a case because if we were going 10 years back, we would not have focused so much about the urban space. Then it would just have been a red building, like everybody else. But by trying to focusing on how does the building meet the urban space, and how can we create a space out here where people want to sit and put money into that as well. This means that there will be a lot of people here that do not normally come into the sports building, but they do now because they often meet a lot of other kids that is in the sports building. So it's also a way of getting more people to use, to do more sport in general. And this is a small story that connects also to the strategy of how can we make more flexible urban spaces. It's a new urban space in front of our art museum, and it's inspired by the project in Luxembourg Garden, the Parc Luxembourg in Paris. And you probably, a lot of you have been there, where they just put chairs around. But by taking a free chair that is not fixed, you can actually decide yourself if you want to join the society or if you want to create a more quiet space on your own. So by having also flexible urban furniture, not only something that is fixed, so you can't steal it and things like that, you actually start to create something that people can interact with in their own way. So you can choose to sit as a group or just sit as one person. But this picture I took one day when there was a group of young guys. And what was so funny was that they were not using the chairs for seating. This is, they're standing in a water basin, a very huge water area. And they just took the chairs and then they started to jump across the water instead of sitting at them. But in a way I think this is really interesting that those chairs is not only for seating, but you can actually start also to use them as a playground. And the last story is the one that I said that I would return to, is one of the projects in our cloudburst strategy. So by having this focusing on how can we take care of the cloudburst, we have had the politicians really to have big ambitions in this situation. So they decided those 300 projects. One of them is the inhale parking, and it is connected with an analyzing of the whole city of where will the water flow normally, and all the area up here is going high, so there will be a lot of water that will go down to this park. So now we will transform this park, which is a listed park, into an area that can keep the water for a long period when there is a heavy cloudburst. And it is designed in a way where it also takes the notion of the human being as a part of the design of the project, so that you can use the water and you can use it when there is no water, because when you're talking about cloudburst, most of the time it will be with no water. So we have to be aware of the beauty also when the water is not in there. That was the last small case. And then I just have 2 sentences talking about a personal way of looking at the future. I think that one of the things that will change the way that we work in the administration, both with the new strategy that our politicians have decided, asking us to go and co-create the city, but also with the knowledge of how we have been developing the city, and the knowledge of that the modernistic period is dead. We can't focus, we can't design the ideal world, so we have to understand that society is changing the whole time, people is changing the whole time. So by having this knowledge, I think this is one of my favorite statements for the time being, said by Sigmund Baumann, a sociologist, I can't say it in English, sociolog. Anyone knows him? Sociologist, yeah, thank you. His daughter is an architect, Irena Baumann, and one of my very good friends, but that's another story. But he says that, I think at the moment, if you think about making society better, you have to count mostly on this level of human integration. You architects and urbanists should not consider yourself as managers of humans. You should see yourself as liberators, animators, and inspirers who inspire people to do interesting things themselves and who help develop their potential which otherwise would be stifled. And I think that is very important in the way that we talk about city development in the future, that we are aware of this, both as politicians and as administrations in the different countries all over the world. So this is not only for Copenhagen, but I think that is a general point of view. And the last one is a Danish landscape architect called Stig Lennart Andersen, and he was the curator of the Danish pavilion at the Danish Biennale 2 years ago. Anyone went to Biennale? Not that many. Less than has been bicycling today, I can say. The Danish pavilion was, I think, for me that Biennale was one of the most fantastic Biennale ever, because Rem Koolhaas, that curated that Biennale, told everybody very clearly that the modernistic period is done, gone, and that we have to look at a new society and a new way of looking at society. And that was a very clear statement for me. He did also, there was a couple in one of the old buildings where he has been putting in all the technical installation that the rational people is putting into the buildings today. So stupid. So when you saw that he has been taking away the beauty of the space because of rational installations to take care of the climate, then you really understood that something has gone really, really wrong with society the last 100 years. What Stig is saying is that he's saying that we have forgotten, if we go back in history, there was a balance between the rational thinking and the irrational thinking. But we forgot that in last century. So he says we have to go back to that. We have to find the balance between the rational and the irrational. Not that they have to compete or the one is better than the other, but we have to have both as a contrast to make society. And he says that for him, I just read it, that we have repressed the importance of aesthetics and instead solely rely on rationality as that which shall guide us forward. This approach has failed us for the last hundreds of years, and it will continue to fail unless we start taking seriously the essential complementary to the rational, the aesthetics. So he's really talking about how we sense the world. And I think talking to politicians, to citizens, to clients, everybody knows something about sensing. Everybody has the feeling of crying. Everybody has the feeling of being in nature, feeling the wind. So in a way there is also a language that we can actually talk together about, where we talk about the rational world. We don't know all about infrastructure, so we don't ask questions about it because he knows about that. So I won't go into a dialogue with that. So for me, I think that is also a very important statement for the future, that we should just talk about what is important. And that is that we are in the world sensing, and that we should make that notion and that knowledge into the way that we design our buildings and design our urban spaces. And in a way, I don't think that it is that difficult. But we have to believe it, the politicians has to ask for it, the administration has to design new processes and talk with people in new ways if we have to build it up. So that was the last one.